Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I am David Blackwood, 43 years old, an actuary by profession and, unfortunately, a husband facing failure due to recent events. Numbers have always been my refuge. Risk assessment, probability calculations, and statistical analyses form the foundation of my existence. I could easily tell you the chances of a 30-year-old non-smoker developing lung cancer or the likelihood of your house being struck by lightning. Yet, I couldn't predict the storm brewing in my own life. My wife, Sophia, was a high school art teacher. We met 15 years ago at a gallery opening, where her vibrant spirit and appreciation for the abstract contrasted with my comfort in the concrete. They say opposites attract, another cliché I'm reluctant to embrace, but it holds true for us. Our children, Ethan and Ava, who is 9, and Ethan, who is 12, embody the perfect blend of our contrasting personalities. Ethan is analytical and reserved, while Ava is creative and outspoken. I thought we had our family life figured out, a perfect equation. The party was Sophia's idea. "Let's celebrate life," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with an enthusiasm I struggled to grasp. "Invite everyone, colleagues, neighbors, friends. Let's make it big." I should have noticed then the desperation lurking behind her smile, the slight tremor in her voice. But I was too preoccupied with calculating catering costs and determining the optimal guest-to-space ratio for our modest home. Little did I know, as I prepared invitations and arranged seating, that this party would become the catalyst for unraveling the carefully woven fabric of our lives. When the evening arrived, our home was transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. The air was thick with the scent of hors d'oeuvres and the sound of ice clinking in glasses. I stood in the corner of our living room, nursing a gin and tonic, observing the scene unfold like a detached spectator. Sophia flitted from group to group, her laughter echoing across the room. She wore a deep green dress that complemented her auburn hair, looking more vibrant than I had seen her in months. I should have felt pleased, but something gnawed at the edges of my contentment. "Quite the shindig, Thorne," exclaimed William Carter, slapping me on the back. William was a colleague, a fellow actuary known for his loud ties and even louder opinions. "Didn't think you had it in you." I forced a smile, replying, "It was Sophia's idea." "Ah, the missus," William nodded sagely. "Always knew she was the fun one." I watched as Sophia engaged in an animated conversation with Henry Morgan, our new neighbor. Henry had moved in 3 months ago, a divorced physiotherapist with a passion for running marathons and growing organic vegetables. He leaned in close to Sophia, his hand briefly touching her arm. A twinge of something stirred within me. Jealousy? Unease? I pushed it aside, attributing it to social anxiety. Just then, Ethan appeared at my elbow, his face a mask of preteen discomfort. "Dad, can I go to my room? This is boring." "Sorry, bud. Your mother wants us all here. Family unity and all that." I ruffled his hair, earning an eye roll in response. As the night wore on and the crowd thinned, I found myself in the kitchen, loading plates into the dishwasher, grateful for the mundanity of the task. The house had grown quieter, but not silent. Murmured conversations and occasional laughter drifted from the backyard. It was Ava who found me first. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with confusion and something else. "Fear?" "Dad," she whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "I think you need to come outside." A sense of dread built in my chest as I followed her. As we stepped onto the back porch, I saw Ethan standing rigid, staring at something beyond the rose bushes Sophia had planted last spring. And then I saw them, Sophia and Henry, their bodies intertwined behind the very roses she had nurtured just months ago. The scene was unmistakable yet surreal. My analytical mind began to dissect the tableau before me. The angle of Henry's arm, the arch of Sophia's back, the way her green dress pooled around her waist. Time seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously. I was acutely aware of my children's presence, as well as the few lingering guests who had stumbled upon this moment. Then the sound of a glass shattering pierced the air, breaking the tableau. Sophia's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto mine. For a brief instant, she looked like a stranger, flushed, disheveled, her eyes bright with an emotion I couldn't name. But then something shifted in her gaze. Not shock, not horror, but relief? "Well," Sophia said, her voice steady as she disentangled herself from Henry, "I suppose we can drop the pretense now." I felt a harsh, humorless laugh bubble up in my throat. "Pretense? Is that what we're calling our marriage now?" Henry stood awkwardly, trying to straighten his clothes. He didn't look ashamed, just resigned. "I told you this wasn't the way, LYD," he muttered. Wasn't the way for what? I asked, my voice sounding calmer than I felt. Sophia squared her shoulders, looking more like herself than she had in months. To make you see, David, to make you understand that it's been over for a long time. Her words hit me like a physical blow, and I struggled to process what she was saying. So this spectacle was for my benefit? For all of us, Sophia replied, gesturing vaguely. I've tried talking to you, David, for months, years even, but you never hear me. You're always so wrapped up in your numbers, your probabilities. I needed you to see something you couldn't quantify. I became acutely aware of our audience, our children, the remaining guests. Everyone out, I said, my voice tight. Party's over. The guests filed out quickly, murmuring awkward goodbyes and avoiding eye contact. William lingered for a moment, concern etched on his face. David, if you need anything? I nodded curtly, not trusting myself to speak. Soon, it was just the four of us, our family, now fractured beyond recognition. Kids, go to your rooms, I said softly. But Dad, Ethan started to protest. Please, I cut him off. Your mother and I need to talk. They went, reluctantly, leaving Sophia and me alone in the debris of our imploded life. Sophia stood before me, her face set in determination. The woman I had loved for 15 years, the mother of my children, now seemed like a stranger wearing my wife's face. Why like this? The question escaped me, small and broken. She sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. Because you understand data, David. Cold, hard facts. Well, here's a fact for you. I've been unfaithful. Here's another. I'm not sorry. Her words cut deeper than I could have imagined. I had always prided myself on being a good provider, a stable presence. But it seemed that stability wasn't enough. How long? I asked, dreading the answer. With Henry. 3 months, Sophia replied matter-of-factly. But I've been unhappy for years. You just never noticed. As the implications of her words sank in, a terrible thought struck me. Sophia, I said, my voice hoarse. The kids, are they? For the first time, real anger flashed in her eyes. Don't you dare, David. Don't you dare use your precious probabilities to question that. They are yours in every way that matters. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I knew it would grow into something ugly and unavoidable. I think you should leave tonight, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. Stay wherever you want. We'll figure out the rest later. As she walked past me to pack a bag, I realized that this was just the beginning. The real storm was yet to come. The days following the party blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and robotic routines. I took a leave of absence from work, citing a family emergency. William, to his credit, didn't ask questions. Ethan and Ava moved through the house like ghosts, their eyes hollow and accusing. I tried to talk to them, to explain, but how could I when I barely understood it myself? On the third day, as I mechanically poured cereal for the kids' breakfast, Ethan broke the silence. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Ethan asked, his voice cracking on the last word. I set the cereal box down, gripping the edge of the counter. I don't know, buddy. It's complicated. It's not complicated, Ava piped up, her voice hard. Mom's a cheater. We should hate her. No, Ava, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my tone. We don't hate your mother. What she did was wrong, but hate doesn't solve anything. Then what does? Ethan asked, looking up at me with eyes that seemed too old for his face. I didn't have an answer. Sophia called that evening. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message 5 times. David, we need to talk. About the kids, about everything. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but there are things you need to know. Things I should have told you long ago. Please call me back. I didn't. Instead, I found myself sitting in our home office, surrounded by family photos and financial documents. 15 years of life, reducible to images and numbers. I picked up a framed picture from our wedding day. Sophia's smile was radiant, her eyes fixed on me with a look I now struggled to define. Was it love? Or had I simply seen what I wanted to see? As I set the photo down, my eyes fell on a medical bill from years ago. A routine checkup for Ethan, nothing out of the ordinary. Except for the date. 9 months before Ethan's birth. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I began to calculate, to cross-reference dates and events. Sophia's words echoed in my head. I've been unhappy for years. You just never noticed. How much had I missed? How many signs had I overlooked, too focused on my precious probabilities to see the human element? With shaking hands, I reached for my phone. The testing facility was sterile and impersonal, much like the process itself. A cheek swab, a form to fill out, a hefty fee to pay. The technician, a young woman with kind eyes, assured me the results would be ready in a few days. "May I ask," she said hesitantly, "is this for a paternity test?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She smiled sympathetically. "I see a lot of angry people come through here, looking for ammunition. But you? You just look sad." Her observation caught me off guard. "I suppose I am," I admitted. "I thought I knew my life. Now I'm not sure of anything." As I left the facility, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Part of me wanted to race back in, to stop the whole process. What if the results confirmed my fears? Could I love Ethan and Ava any less, knowing they might not be mine biologically? The wait was excruciating. I threw myself into work, into household chores, anything to keep my mind occupied. Sophia's calls became more frequent, more insistent, but I continued to ignore them. Finally, the email arrived. "Your results are ready," it said, with a link to view them online. My finger hovered over the mouse, trembling slightly. I clicked. The page loaded, a jumble of scientific terms and percentages. But there, at the bottom, in bold letters, probability of paternity, 99.99%. Relief washed over me, so intense it was almost painful. They were mine, both of them. The doubts that had plagued me, the fears that had kept me awake at night, all unfounded. As the initial wave of emotion subsided, a new feeling took its place. Shame. How could I have doubted? How could I have let Sophia's infidelity taint the love I had for our children? I reached for my phone, dialing Sophia's number before I could talk myself out of it. "David." Her voice was tentative, hopeful. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "About the kids, about everything. There are things I need to know, things I should have asked long ago." There was a pause, then a soft exhale. "Yes," she said. "We do. Thank you for calling." As I hung up, I realized that this conversation wouldn't solve everything. The betrayal, the hurt, the years of unspoken resentments, they were still there. But for the first time since the party, I felt a glimmer of something like hope. Not for our marriage, which I was beginning to accept was over, but for understanding, for closure, for a way forward that wouldn't destroy the family we had built. Even if it looked different now, I looked at the framed photo of Ethan and Ava on my desk. My children, undeniably, irrefutably mine. Whatever came next, whatever difficult conversations and decisions lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to protect them, to help them through this. It was time to stop hiding behind numbers and face the messy, complicated reality of human emotions, starting with a long overdue conversation with Sophia. The conversation with Sophia was as difficult as I'd anticipated. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown, away from curious neighbors and the memories that haunted our home. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice low but firm. Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "I expected as much." "I am sorry, David," she said, not for wanting to leave, but for how she had gone about it. "Why, Sophia? Why not just tell me you were unhappy?" She sighed, stirring her untouched coffee. "I tried in my way, but you never seemed to hear me. I felt invisible. With Henry, I felt seen." I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. "And the kids? Have you spoken to them?" Her face fell. "They won't talk to me. Ethan hung up on me, and Ava sent me a text saying she hates me." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. They're hurt and confused. "Give them time, will you?" Her voice was small. "Give them time? I mean, not keep them from me." I met her eyes, seeing the fear there. "I won't keep them from you, Sophia, but I won't force them to see you either. That has to be their choice." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of lawyers, paperwork, and difficult decisions. We agreed on joint custody, but the children's refusal to see Sophia complicated matters. Our lawyer, a pragmatic woman named Isabella Cruz, advised us to give them space. "Forced visitations will only breed more resentment," she explained. "Let them come around on their own terms." Dividing our assets proved less contentious than I'd feared. Sophia didn't fight me on keeping the house. She'd already found an apartment closer to her school. We split our savings, our debts, our lives neatly down the middle. It felt surreal, reducing 15 years to numbers on a spreadsheet. The hardest part was watching Ethan and Ava struggle. Their anger at Sophia manifested in different ways. Ethan became withdrawn, throwing himself into his studies with an intensity that worried me. Ava, on the other hand, lashed out. Her grades slipped as she picked fights at school. I arranged for them to see a therapist, Dr. Lilychin, who specialized in helping children through divorce. After their first session, she pulled me aside. "They're carrying a lot of hurt, Mr. Blackwood," she said gently, "but they're also worried about you. They need to see that you're okay, that you're moving forward." Her words stuck with me, prompting a realization. I'd been so focused on managing the practical aspects of our separation that I'd neglected my own emotional healing. 6 months after the party that changed everything, I found myself sitting in my own therapist's office. Dr. Lucas Gray, a man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, had been helping me navigate the emotional minefield of divorce. "You've made progress, David," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I sense there's something still holding you back." I nodded, struggling to find the words. I keep thinking about probabilities, the likelihood of infidelity in long-term marriages, the statistical success rates of second marriages, the impact of divorce on children's future relationships. I can't turn it off." Dr. Gray smiled slightly. "You're using numbers as a shield, David. It's safer to think about statistics than to confront your feelings." His words hit home. I'd spent so long hiding behind data that I'd forgotten how to simply feel. "What do I do?" I asked, feeling lost. "Start by allowing yourself to experience emotions without analyzing them. When you feel angry, be angry. When you're sad, let yourself cry. It's okay not to have everything figured out." Taking his advice to heart, I began to open up more to Ethan and Ava. We started having weekly feelings check-ins, where we'd each share something we were struggling with. It was awkward at first, but slowly, we began to heal together. Sophia and I settled into a cautious co-parenting routine. The children still refused to stay at her new place, but they progressed to brief, supervised visits. It wasn't ideal, but it was progress. As for me, I was learning to rediscover myself outside of my roles as husband and father. I joined a local hiking group, started taking cooking classes, and even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, but steps toward a new future. 1 year after the party, I stood in our backyard, looking at the spot where I discovered Sophia and Henry. The rose bushes were in full bloom, their beauty untainted by the memory of that night. I realized then that I no longer felt the sharp pain of betrayal when I thought of Sophia. Instead, there was a dull ache of what might have been, mixed with a growing sense of acceptance. Ethan appeared beside me, his lanky frame now nearly as tall as mine. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, his voice deeper than I remembered. I smiled, putting an arm around his shoulders. "Yeah, buddy. I think I am." Ava joined us, slipping her hand into mine. "Can we order pizza for dinner?" she asked, a hint of her old mischief in her eyes. As we headed inside, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Our family looked different now, reshaped by pain and healing, but we were still a family, bound by love and resilience. The future was uncertain. No amount of statistical analysis could predict what lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, I was okay with that uncertainty. We would face it together, one day at a time. "Sure, Ava. Let's get your favorite. How about extra cheese?" I replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. As we gathered around the kitchen table to plan our order, I realized that the love we shared was stronger than the scars we carried. Each day was a step toward a new chapter, and I was ready to embrace it, no matter where it led us. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.